What started with a sweeping 11-year pardon of everything Hunter Biden has done on Sunday has escalated into a pardon scandal this week. Talk of more pardons coming for corrupt anti-Trump politicians Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney, two of the most deceptive players in Washington, preaching holier-than-thou politics and political ideals while working to undermine our republic with lies and deceit. And there is even more. The Washington Post reporting the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, is now on this likely pardon list. Just before the election, a very political move from a guy who says he's not political. Milley called Trump the most dangerous man in the country and fascist to the core. It didn't work. Trump still won. But Milley has proven himself to be the real liability when you look into it. And he may really need a pardon after subverting the commander-in-chief, putting in phone calls to China, our #1 adversary, behind Trump's back while Trump was the president, a move that has been described as treasonous. Mark Milley is simply an advisor to the president, and he knows that.
I am obligated, regardless of consequences, to give my advice to the president, but no president is obligated to follow that advice.
Exactly. Mark Milley personally believes Donald Trump is unstable. He's dangerous. He is a fascist. Last month's election conclusively proved that he is wrong, that millions of Americans disagree with him, more disagree than do agree. And history disagrees with him as well. Trump's presidency was marked with tremendous stability here in the United States and around the world, the ending of wars, the decimation of global terror and unrest. In fact, the only instability was actually manufactured by the left, which Milley now aligns with, of course. When career criminal George Floyd died, American Marxists saw an opportunity to destabilize our country before Trump's reelection. When Antifa Black Lives Matter protests came to Washington, a 200-year-old church that sits across the street from the White House was burned by radical left-wing rioters. St. John's is known as the Church of the Presidents. All of our presidents have worshipped there, dating back to James Madison in the early 1800s. It is a very special place. The bell on top of the church was cast by Paul Revere's son. Seeing it lit on fire by the bottom of our society was enraging. You remember when it happened. And when it happened, it was clear that we weren't dealing with protests anymore. We were dealing with rioting from people that hate and want to destroy our country. And that rioting and the looting was spiraling out of control. Trump responded by threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act. This is early June 2020. He wanted to let the Army and the National Guard potentially secure our cities. It was just a threat. He hadn't said he was going to do it yet, but that was his threat. His staff had the rioters cleared from Lafayette Square. He and his cabinet, including Mark Milley, walked to St. John's Church to send a message to Americans. We understand. They're lighting your cities on fire. They're losing their minds. We are not going to let the Marxists in our country destroy the country in the name of George Floyd, for God's sake. Well, the left-wing media, as they always do, excoriated the president for squashing those protests. They called it a photo op. They called him a fascist because that's what they always call him. And then days later, Mark Milley threw fuel on the fire that the media had lit around this and just gave so much credibility to the people that were destroying our country when he came out and apologized.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned, uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from.
It wasn't politics, bro. They were burning the country down, just so you know. He apologized for joining the president in an effort to squash riots as they tore through many, many, many American cities. The rioters and the looters were immediately emboldened after that statement, of course. And the politicians all saying the same things as well. And look what it created. It created 4 years of chaos. You still have drugstores closing down all over this country. They can't stop people from looting. Many cities in our country were trashed nightly for months. But that is not what bothered Mark Milley. He was more bothered by Trump's instinct to use the military to stop people from burning down American cities, because we were told that these are protests, that's a protest. Since when? Explained here by 60 Minutes. Take a listen.
General Milley did tell us he was so disillusioned with the former president's actions, he nearly resigned. Instead, according to former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, he and the general made a pact to protect the military from becoming politicized or misused.
Politicized or misused. The rioting from the summer of 2020, just that summer alone, caused more than $1 billion in damage. Some say close to $2 billion. Most of which, where did it happen? Poor inner city neighborhoods, small businesses, black-owned businesses. Mark Milley pretends that these were protests, and Trump is a fascist for trying to shut down protests. A protest when you hold a sign up and you chant. That's a protest. Burning down a 200-year-old church is not a protest. Burning down police precincts, that's not a protest. Burning down American cities, that's not a protest. And the use of the military to quickly end the chaos that we saw in the early summer of 2020 would have made sense. It would have made a lot more sense than letting our country be shredded by, again, the bottom of our society for 3 months, and frankly, a lot longer than that as well. But of course, that's too much common sense for a swamp creature like Mark Milley. His mind warped by senseless Washington bureaucracy, virtue signaling, and identity politics. Here was Milley. You remember this moment on Capitol Hill when he really got to show off just how warped and woke he has become?
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it.
I want to understand white rage. I mean, it's an MSNBC phrase. What ridiculous book from hell would you get a phrase like that from? Mark Milley says Trump is a fascist, a threat to the country. So far, Trump has ended one war and started none. 1-0. By February, there's a good chance he's going to be 3-0. What's Milley's record, by the way? He oversaw the Afghan pullout. One Marine who lost limbs at Abbey Gate explained what it was really like in Afghanistan. Nobody could make a decision. Nobody knew who was in charge.
Over the communication network, we passed that there was a potential threat and an IED attack imminent. We asked him if we could shoot. Our battalion commander said, and I quote, "I don't know," end quote. Eventually, the individual disappeared. To this day, we believe he was a suicide bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored.
I wish I knew earlier about this strange method that shrunk my prostate. After ignoring it for months, I find...
Could have had the bomber of Abbey Gate. Nobody could make a decision. That's the Mark Milley legacy. He's too worried about white rage, I guess, and allowing people to burn down your country in the name of George Floyd. Our military under Mark Milley, cited right there by that gentleman. Nobody voted for Mark Milley to run this country or to run our military. But when he was in the White House with Trump, he decided to take that power upon himself and take it away from millions of Americans and the President of the United States because he thought he knew better. And isn't that the most familiar theme that you see time and time again from all these people that think they're doing right? They just think they're smarter. They think they know better, even though they don't. And they actually hate democracy. It's ironic considering how much they talk about it, but they hate the fact that we all get a say in how this country is run. They think they know better. And now Mark Milley is lobbying Joe Biden, clearly, for a preemptive pardon after treasonous conversations with our #1 adversary, China. Conversations that usurped power from the President of the United States to a very inefficient, unelected man.